Welcome back. Now, since the dawn of our democracy and freedom here in South Africa, we've seen a number of women taking up leadership positions in areas previously dominated by men. One of the success stories of our democracy is that of the representation of women in political and decision-making positions. Involving women in government processes constitutes one of South Africa's globally acclaimed success stories. To talk to us on how legislation and policy have empowered women, we are joined by Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka, who's a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria. Very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, international and regional legislation have contributed to gender development. Can you just give us a little overview? What does that entail?
Well, the three main criteria, obviously from a point of view on developing policy, on developing programs and legislation. But what it has done is that we've had organizations and policies such as CEDAW, so the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. You've got aspects like the SADC Gender Protocol and Development. We have components through in terms of the African Charter on people's rights and for the rights of women in Africa. And that all transcends down into what happens at a national level. So with these types of institutes or legislations that exists, it all has to be mandated down and disseminated and adopted by different countries, because on a national point of view, they're responsible for signing these various protocols. So for instance, with the SADC protocol on gender development, that was ratified in 2008 by 13 member states, and so those are the types of things that we look at in order to aid development across the continent and for women in general on a global level. And you've also got components like the Millennium Development Goals, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals, which have obviously succeeded them.
There are some obstacles, though, to attaining those specific goals to address gender equality. What would you say are some of those obstacles that Sustainable Development Goals face?
Well, first, I think what's unique on the Sustainable Development Goals is that they really singled out a specific goal on gender equality. So for the Millennium Development Goals, they focused on poverty, they also focused on health. But in this phase of the Sustainable Development Goals, it's really about human rights and pushing through on gender equality. And on that particular goal, it's got three core areas. It's about reducing violence against women, being able to increase capabilities and access to resources, and the third area is about being able to have a voice, leadership and participation. So those are the three aims, and if we look at the aspects which will possibly be almost hindering them, there would be aspects of power reduction from patriarchal societies, pervasiveness of gender-based violence. Poverty is a tremendous area, as well as economic progress, because the purpose of these new set of goals, which ideally are supposed to come about or materialize by 2030, is that they're all interdependent and interrelated. You can't have economic success if you cannot alleviate poverty. You can't eradicate disease if you're not attending to healthcare. So it all comes together.
Interrelated, and I mean, we've seen that the poverty element is really a big role player when it comes to uplifting women.
It certainly is.
I want to talk to you about South Africa in particular. In South Africa, of course, we have wonderful representation in Parliament, and we get the plaudits for it that we've seen. But are we there? Are we, for instance, ready for a female president in South Africa? What do you think?
I would absolutely say yes, we are ready for a female president. And part of our readiness comes through from the history that we've had and the history that women have had on a global level. So we look successively in terms of our parliamentary representation, going from less than 2.7% pre-94 to 27%, 30%, 33%, 45%, and then to 42%. And the only way that we've managed to achieve these components is through legislation. So with the SADC Gender Protocol, they had a mandate of having 30% representation of women across all decision-making capability, whether that was in the public space or in the private space, and that was ideally aimed to be achieved by 2005. We also saw the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill, which has subsequently lapsed, but the purpose of that is leveraging existing legislation and being able to bring that to the fore, because that was about pursuing the 50% representation of women.
Just give us a quick idea. What's the difference between gender equity and gender equality, and what's the role that they play in empowering women?
Well, from a gender equity point of view, that deals with the fair and equal distribution of assets. And from an equality perspective, that is giving people the opportunity to enjoy their rights, their freedoms on an equal level. And also, according to the UN, it's about accepting equal consequences for responsibilities.
Yeah.
Because by having all of these benefits, there are responsibilities that come with it. And the only way that we can get to a point of where we're achieving gender equality is if we are developing on the equity component as well as the equality piece.
Yeah.
That's the only way that we can come through to get that empowerment aspect of women in the workplace.
And just to conclude, what are some of the enablers and outcomes of women empowerment for that matter?
Well, I would say some of the enablers are in the self, and the key area on the self is about education. We've seen it from UNESCO that they indicate that for every year that a child is in school, even if it's basic levels of literacy, they have a 10% chance of increasing on their yield of income. Through education, women have got greater access to more opportunities. Without education, there simply is no choice.
Yeah.
You've got higher skills, and we all see it that in the corporate space, that your level of education and level of position go hand in hand. There's a direct correlation.
Yeah.
And the way that the world and the economy is evolving from a manufacturing space through to a service space, you don't need brute force to contend with. The other areas would be from a socialization point of view, changing and adapting our social structures, and in the relational space. So looking at those dynamics and having changes from men as well as other stakeholders embracing gender equality to get to that point.
It's fantastic to hear that. That's really great news to hear that. The time of the brute is over. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria. She'll be joining us periodically, I think once a month at the moment, to come and talk about issues around gender equality and, well, what are the pitfalls and what we can do better with regards to empowering women, not just in South Africa, but on the entire African continent.